the power relationships in our country, instead of being political, economic, etc., are economic first and foremost, followed by political. The state is in the service of the economic interests rather than vice versa. And that is a recipe to undermine democracy.
So I wanted to...
Right, because I mean...
Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
Well, I was just going to point out that, like, you know, what Brennan was talking about there is what most people describe as fascism. I mean, when the government is taken over by, you know, private business interests, I mean, that is considered fascism.
Yeah, in an economic sense.
Okay, so I wanted to give an example of sort of the other side. Like I was talking about how you can choose for a regulatory system. You can choose people who are in the industry or involved in the industry, in favor of the industry, or people who are against the industry. And this is kind of a different example, but I felt like I should point out Bush's appointment of John Bolton to the UN.
Fuck John Bolton.
The guy who said that he would have no problem with the UN being bombed, and he's the guy that the
fuck him in his fucking mustache.
Anything to say about that, Zach?
Sorry.
I don't like his mustache either.
Oh, sorry, Zach. You have a mustache too. Didn't mean to discriminate.
Oh yeah, but mine's okay. Bolton sucks.
But I mean, there we have an example of somebody being placed in an organization who is, I mean, you couldn't be more clear in that he's against the organization and that he's there to obstruct and to prevent them from getting anything done. And I mean, that obviously, I'm against that. I don't like that guy. I can't believe we appointed him to the UN. But then again, when we start talking about, I don't know, I guess, I mean, obviously it's a different case because with a regulatory industry, their job really is to look out for our interests as they relate to a certain industry, right? I mean, the industry obviously is looking out for its own interests, whereas a regulatory system on that industry is supposed to be looking out for our interests when that industry is doing what it does. So, I don't know. I mean, but if you ask a Republican, they'll say that John Bolton, you know, somebody who's against the UN is the guy to put in the UN to protect us from the UN, you know?
The problem, I think, is the way you're framing this. It's not do you want somebody who's pro-industry or anti-industry, pro-regulation or anti-regulation? That's a completely wrong frame, because in some cases the industry is being egregious, in some cases it's not. In some cases certain players in the industry are being bad, and in some cases they're not. They're really helpful to society. The question the question isn't whether the regulators are pro or anti-industry or pro or anti-regulation. The question is whether they are pro or anti the public good. And the point is to craft a system that chooses the regulators who are interested in the public good, whether that means they're being against the industry or for the industry or whatnot. I mean, that's the problem, is the frame. We got to take back talking points. And I think we need to change that frame of being pro or anti-regulation to being pro or anti-public good or anti-freedom or whatever legitimate value we want. Because in some cases regulation is good, in some cases it is bad. The very idea that it's the wrong frame to have. We need to look at crafting systems that represent people, not politics. Are you digging what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I do want to point out that I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
I think that's a really good point, because I think that whether someone is pro or anti-industry or pro or anti-regulation, I think are ridiculous standards. You know, I think someone to be a good regulator should not want to impose regulations, but realize that they are at times necessary. In other words, have a presumption that says that, it would be best not to regulate, but realizing that there is a clear and constant need to do so. So, is that person anti-regulation or pro-regulation? Anti-industry or pro-industry? Well, I mean, to the extent that industry has to function within a system, and if it brings the entire system down, then it's non-functional, regardless of whether it's turning a profit or not. I think it's fair to say that, someone can truly have the best interests of the industry in mind when they're regulating it. I mean, wouldn't it have been better for the banking industry to not get rid of Glass-Steagall, even though that's what they thought they wanted? They thought they wanted...
Exactly. It's a false dichotomy.
Right.
Well, it was bad for some of them, but it was really good for others.
They thought they wanted the elimination of that restriction, but they didn't know what to do with it. When they actually got their biscuit, all they did was use it to, shoot themselves in the foot.
No, I think that's, some of them went under in the end, but the people in charge made a lot of money when they did so. And the ones that didn't go under made a lot of money, got a bunch of federal money, and then continued making a lot of money.
Oh, so their goals were fulfilled then by the deregulation is what you're saying. Because the people...
I'm saying they did great, yeah.
The people who are really lobbying, they were lobbying for themselves.
In this case, obviously the interests of the United States, of the American people, out the window, but they definitely, I think, got what they were after.
See, I think this is actually one of the best examples of regulatory capture. I mean, can I read one more segment? I've got a fairly long thing from Matt Taibbi, but I think it does a great job of kind of detailing out the regulatory capture of Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, go for it.
The history of the recent financial crisis, which doubles the history of the rapid decline and fall of the suddenly swindled dry American empire, reads like a who's who of Goldman Sachs graduates. By now, most of us know the major players, as George Bush's last Treasury Secretary, former Goldman CEO Henry Paulson, was the architect of the bailout, a suspiciously self-serving plan to funnel trillions of your dollars to a handful of his old friends on Wall Street. Robert Rubin, Bill Clinton's former Treasury Secretary, spent 26 years at Goldman before becoming chairman of Citigroup, which in turn got a $300 billion taxpayer bailout from Paulson. There's John Thain, the asshole chief of Merrill Lynch, who bought an $87,000 area rug for his office as his company was imploding. A former Goldman banker, Thain enjoyed a multi-billion-dollar handout from Paulson, who used billions in taxpayer funds to help Bank of America rescue Thain's sorry company. And Robert Steele, the former Goldmanite head of Wachovia, scored himself and his fellow executives $225 million in golden parachute payments as his bank was self-destructing. There's Joshua Bolton, Bush's chief of staff during the bailout, and Mark Patterson, the current Treasury chief of staff, who was a Goldman lobbyist just a year ago, and Ed Liddy, the former Goldman director whom Paulson put in charge of bailed-out insurance giant AIG, who forked over $13 billion to Goldman after Liddy came on board. The heads of the Canadian and Italian national banks are Goldman alums, as is the head of the World Bank, the head of the New York Stock Exchange, the last two heads of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which, incidentally, is now in charge of overseeing Goldman, not to mention ... But then, any attempt to construct a narrative around all the former Goldmanites in influential positions quickly becomes an absurd and pointless exercise, like trying to make a list of everything. I always loved that quotation, because it shows you how pervasive it is. How Goldman alums are basically controlling almost every aspect, of the economy in a real sense.
Now, why is Barack Obama going with this? Why is Barack Obama continuing to employ these people in his government?
Because of the realities of money and politics. I mean, there have been the two largest contributors to Barack Obama's campaign were Wall Street and the insurance industry. Need I say more? I mean, they've contributed the most, and they've been very well taken care of for their money. I mean, they're getting what they paid for.
I think it's also cognitive capture too. All of the people involved in this, well, not all of them, but most of them, they believe in what they're doing. They think that they're on the side of the right thing, and they've been selected for their positions economically because of it. The people that Barack Obama surrounds himself with, they advise him, and they convince him, and they persuade him. And Barack Obama, he's a very smart man, but I think he's been cognitively captured